Creo que sí que está recording, ¿eh?
Sí.
Sí, ahora sí lo veo. Perfecto, vale.
Bueno, profesor, entonces, si quiere empezamos la entrevista. La entrevista va a ser en inglés, entonces empiezo en este mismo momento. Professor Ventura-Medina, thank you very much for your time. I know that you are currently in a working trip. So this meeting is in the framework of the Ignite project. It's a project to reduce gender disparity in STEM from kindergarten to professional life. This project is to build connections and develop network for interdisciplinary collaborations. I'm going to formulate some questions, so you are free to answer them or not, or even withdraw this interview if you consider necessary. Please let me know if I can record our conversation.
Yes, of course you can. Yes, not a problem.
Thank you, Professor. I would like to start asking about your background.
My background. So I am a chemical engineer by training and did my bachelor's and master's and PhD in the area of chemical engineering and minerals processing later on. And did do a bit of a postdoctoral experience in that area, and then move on to doing training for secondary school mathematics education in the UK. And after that, then I took a position, actually, an academic position in the Department of Chemical Engineering at the University of Manchester, where I was what is called an education-focused academic. And in that space, then I started developing a lot of my pedagogical and innovation in education expertise, which led me to also doing research in that area. And then now I am a professor of STEM innovation in STEM education at the University of Eindhoven in the Netherlands, at the TU.
Thank you, Professor. Professor, I would like to know, well, your STEM, the STEM in which you are working is, or started, was chemistry. What attracted you to this field initially?
I don't really know. I suppose as a young person, I thought that there was, like many others, I was good in the school of chemistry and mathematics. And then when I had to choose a pathway to go into university, then I decided to try something that was not necessarily either of the two disciplines, pure mathematics or pure chemistry, but something a bit that was a bit of the mixture. And part of that, I think, is because engineering, chemical engineering in my case, which I wasn't very aware of what it really was and what it entailed at the time, I must say also, sounded attractive just because of the combination of the name. That's pretty much it. It sounded something also that might have more of a potential for a good career later on, or and a good way also to develop myself. So I would say that a lot of it was a bit of luck. A lot of it was a bit of what the topics that I was good at school, at high school, and then what I thought was potential opportunities for later on in life. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. That sounds great. Now, what is your current research about?
My current research is really in the space engineering education, and it's very much that I have. My core research is perhaps in the area of team learning and more specifically regulation of team learning and student self-regulation of learning. But I also have quite a lot of interest in different areas, and more globally, skills and competencies is an area that I'm interested in engineering education. Having said that, of course, there is a lot of things that impact the ability of the students to learn and have a good experience, a good learning experience at universities. And that area, I have done a lot of work, not only in innovation, in pedagogy, but also and how teams work and how students learn in teams and how they maybe solve problems, which has also been part of my skills work, but also issues around academic and social integration of the students, for instance, coming from minority backgrounds in STEM, and that includes women as well as other minority backgrounds. In engineering, still women, although not in all the cases, but in many cases, women are relatively a minority group, or most of the times are considered still a minority group, sadly. And so some of the work that I'm currently doing also is about this transitioning between secondary school and higher education. I haven't done a lot of work on outreach and what are the best ways to perhaps capture students, but I always, in my research, in a sense, interface and have discussions with people who work in developing programs in that area. And also I'm interested in the space of professional development and more recently professional development of the teachers. So how is it that we go about developing the educators in higher education to fulfill the roles that are necessary for students to develop certain capabilities or certain competencies. For instance, we talk a lot about the responsible engineer and the engineers that are aware of social responsibility, and that is very much at the interface with issues around sustainability. And so one of the projects that I have currently PhD students working in that space is teaching or developing educators' capabilities to actually face up the challenge of education for sustainability. Likewise, the projects that I'm involved in, which are around issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion, because again, we with the over the years, higher education has become a space where there is more diverse students. And in that sense, there are new challenges coming along. And so a lot of my work also is at the interface of these issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and how is it that we can develop pedagogies and make sure that the ways in which we teach are more inclusive and more diverse. A lot of the times we simply think that this could be, for instance, doing teamwork can be a good way to include more people. But on the other hand, doing teamwork is not necessarily a good way unless you actually have the right support for the right type of minority groups or people who, or if you address the issues around inclusivity appropriately. And so making an inclusive environment isn't really necessarily in the learning space, doesn't mean that you just use a type of pedagogy, it means more than that. And you have to be a bit aware of that. So.
Professor, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work, but congratulations. Professor, why you are interested in innovation in STEM education? Why do you think it was necessary to innovate the way in which STEM subjects are taught?
I think that most of it comes from my own practice, observing how students learn and the difficulties that sometimes come about in them grasping some concepts. So one part of it is that. Part of it is that, as I mentioned before, as time goes, we have more widening participation options. So there are a much bigger variety of students coming into higher education, which means that we also have to adapt the ways in which we teach, or rather the ways in which we get students to learn. And that mostly has brought me to the space of innovation and trying new things or different things in practice, and then trying to also, in the research space, ascertain and gain evidence that demonstrates whether or not some things that you change in the practice work, and to what extent they work and how they work. So that's basically what has brought me to the space of innovation in STEM and doing research in innovative teaching practices.
Okay, Professor, yeah, it's really necessary. Now, how did you know about the Irene Curie program? What attracted you to apply to this program?
So for the Irene Curie program, it was really the position that was brought to my attention in reality, and it was advertised at the time. So a current colleague of mine contacted me. I was in another institution at the time, working in the UK at Strathclyde University, and a current colleague contacted me and said, "We have this opportunity, this new job. We're looking for somebody who is precisely looking at innovation in STEM education, who has a research portfolio in that area." And so a lot of the work that I have done actually fitted quite nicely in that space. And he mentioned that, of course, they were looking particularly for some female applicants. Because the university was interested in reducing the gap between, or increasing rather, the number of academic staff who were females, who were women in engineering. And that we go back to the issue that, well, we still have many more men than women in engineering. And that doesn't mean only in, of course, in the industry, but also in academia, because there is still very few females or women coming into studying STEM subjects. At the beginning, I must say also that I had my doubts when the position was advertised in such a fashion, because I thought, well, maybe it becomes not the case that I will get the position because I am sufficiently good for the position, so not on the basis of the merit, but on the basis of the fact that I am a woman. And having said, the notion would be that I will be competing with other women. So ultimately, presumably, the selection is still done in merit, right? And ultimately, then I decided to apply. The other thing that I must say then is that, of course, Irene Curie is a name that really inspires. And so I was quite happy to think of, well, if I were to get a position that where I have a fellowship, an Irene Curie fellowship, that really is something that is inspiring, I suppose. The Curie family on its own carries a lot of emphasis on women and in science, and I think that was a nice thing as well.
Professor, yeah, that's interesting story, and I'm pretty sure that they get really competent fellows. Now, how long have you been doing research within the framework of this program?
In this particular program, I joined the university in this position as an Irene Curie fellow, and almost 3 years ago. So I have been working at Eindhoven 3 years ago. One thing that I must say that was also very attractive, and in this case, was the fact that the Irene Curie fellowship came with some significant financial support for doing research. At the time, was a good charter package, and I thought that was really positive because, of course, in my case, like in many other cases, also you move into a new position in a new place. You have to start from zero, applying for funding. You get into an environment where you don't really know everybody or anybody. You don't know the rules of engagement with applying. There is a lot of things that are changing, and therefore you really need a degree of support. And for me, the Irene Curie network, the Irene Curie package of support, let's say, was a good way to start. That's the first thing. Then there is also an association with the university's Irene Curie network. So it's a whole bunch of other people like me who have come to the university with the same scheme, and who are, well, in one way or another, we all sort of struggling with similar issues. And so that was also nice support that I thought I found from the university and from the program, specifically from the fellowship.
Thank you, Professor. Definitely funding is something really, really essential now. Have you been able to bring more women to your research or to your activities, any of your activities that you organize at the university?
I have been in touch with more women, mostly people from either the fellowship network, I think the Irene Curie
Okay.
Fellowship, and also the university has quite an active women in STEM wise network, women in STEM in science and in engineering network, the WISE network, and through the events that they run, it's been possible to get connected with other people. I wouldn't say that I have been directly trying to, or perhaps, link with other women,
Actively looking for.
but certainly some of my research, as I mentioned earlier, not deliberately, but maybe by association or by involvement in some projects, has been in this space of not so much attraction of women of talent to STEM, but much more in the issues around retention. And one of the projects that I am now involved in is an Erasmus Plus project with another 3 institutions from different countries in Europe. Is precisely oriented to looking at the transition of students from secondary school to higher education in relationship to the integrations, both socially and academically. And the focus for Eindhoven, the focus that I chose to look at in our case was exactly women. So we're trying to make sure that we do interventions in the first year courses in both chemical engineering and also innovation science and innovation engineering, industrial engineering and innovation science, where programs where we're trying to target specifically support for women coming into this program. Yeah.
Well, you already attract my attention to your work. I think the last question is before last question. Is there any facilities provided either by the university or the state in Netherlands to help you to have a balance between working in STEM as professor and a personal life? I mean, for instance, like working part-time or come with mentors or spaces to organize social activities only for women in STEM, or any kind of mental health support or nursing programs like lactation room or discount of daycare, or to have the opportunity to come with a diversity officer. Is there any kind of those facilities or accommodation
Yes,
that university had done for you?
yes. I mean, I think that the university has pretty much all these things that you mentioned. For instance, we do have, and I don't think that in a sense they have been highlighted to the Irene Curie Fellows. I don't think that they are really highlighted to the Irene Curie Fellows, which is a nice thing. So, but the university certainly has a mentorship program, for instance. There is, I must say, because I don't have kids, I don't have children, I don't know specifically about daycare and support for daycare facilities. Having said that, I also have people when ask about how do we attract more talent, I always say you need to really make sure that you're providing support in that space, because the literature shows that the bigger problem women face when coming to, for instance, academia is these years where you are having a career, a family break from your career, and then engaging back in academia is problematic. And if you're able to support the space in which both you can work part-time and you can also offer daycare, then that means that more women will participate and will be able to engage. The university also has, and as a matter of fact, I think we do have quite a lot of my colleagues work part-time, and this could be they have mostly family responsibilities. It means that they prefer to work part-time, so they might be working 3 or 4 days of a full week. And in that sense, it's quite flexible, which in my mind is very much a positive thing and different perhaps to some other universities in other countries that I have worked as well, or at least when I have been in these places before. So yes, there is mentorship programs. There is of course the mental
And
well-being
support.
support the university has. In general, I think it's quite a good offer and good support in that space as well. I haven't really used it, but I know of colleagues also who have been supported with these well-being programs. I think that there is quite a good support really in TU Eindhoven for that, not only, as I said, not only for women, for staff in general. Perhaps one thing to say is that as an NCE fellow, then you get quite quickly pointed into all these support.
Thank you, Professor. That's really good. That helps a lot. I think, yeah, and definitely, yes, this is my last question, is what is your impression about the gender gap in STEM in the other countries where you have worked? For instance, in Venezuela, your hometown.
So, well, my impression, I haven't been to Venezuela for many years now,
Yeah,
and
I know.
I've been
Yeah.
the realities, the current realities of the country, but I'll talk a bit about my experiences before. I think that the gender gap in STEM continues to be a problem. I think it is a problem that we're more aware of and that we are trying to do a bit more about. So the changes are in the pipeline. Probably the changes are not as rapid as we would like to do. There is a lot of the times I feel that when we talk about gender gap in STEM, there is also this reaction about why do we need to do anything specific or special for women? And my context case is always the same, that until we actually have nurtured enough the idea of women becoming into a STEM subject, and that becomes more than an exception in a sense. So until we are actually making sure that women earlier on, young females are aware of the fact that these are options for them, that are options that are very valid also in career, then we still need to do something, some patch-up work, as it were. We need to really have some alternative and some schemes of which we try to really shorten the gap. And for instance, the Irene Curie is one of them. There are other schemes and other areas that we, generally speaking, in education is working towards. So on one hand, using measures and schemes that could be seen as positively discriminating in favor of women might be seen problematic in relationship to other males, but on the other hand, or men, but on the other hand, also I think that until we are really in a space where we're truly having a diverse split in STEM, then we need to really do something, and for that we need to really have programs, have awareness programs also. I think that this is more and more important. And we need to start not just in secondary school, because a lot of the times that is already a bit too late, but even in primary schooling. Some of the work actually that has been done in the past that I'm aware of by the Royal Academy of Engineering in the UK, for instance, indicate that there is a lot of forces that make students choose or not choose STEM. And for instance, the family can be one of them. In the case of, for instance, if we look at the education systems in the UK, secondary school, students have to opting to go into a STEM subject in university. They have compulsory education at a certain point, which is uniform across the board. And then is when they make a decision as to what subjects they follow onward. And that's a bit later on. But if you look, for instance, at the education system in the Netherlands, where students have to be very early in the secondary school, make decisions about what subjects they do follow, and that then has a immediate effect on what kind of courses they can take at university. then you become aware quite quickly that you really need to push this awareness and this engagement with enthusing talent to go into STEM, or women to go into STEM much earlier on. And that's why I also say that we really should be looking at primary education, not even just only secondary school and secondary education. So, so yeah, a lot of work still to be done, but I think that it is important that we are making an effort, and that there are programs that help with closing that gap.
Professor, thank you very much for your time. And yes, definitely, there are already models that start working on breaking stereotypes since infancy, like the Hijalik method implemented in Iceland. Then I totally agree with you that it's not the high school is late, but we can start earlier. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much again. Bye-bye.
Okay. I'll stop the recording then.
Yes, please.
Okay.